Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us as we discuss isolation. It's not just for COVID anymore. I'd like to welcome our panel from the Ageless Living Collaborative. They are Dean Madalena, who is founder and CEO of Studio 65. Erica Zitron is our guest today. She is Senior Design Manager from Senior Lifestyle Communities. And Jane Rohde, who is founder of both JSR Associates and Live Together. Thank you all for joining us today. We have a big topic ahead of us because we know that isolation affects everybody at every age group and every demographic at some point or another. So we're going to kind of blow the doors off of this. And we're going to ask that our audience, if they have specific questions, use the question area of the webinar and pose your question. We'll answer it live. And if you have any great solutions that you have found to work for family or friends that you want to share that have effectively combated isolation, we want to hear that too. So with that, we're going to start with maybe a, shall we say, a controversial topic. And I want to start here because I think it affects everybody. And that is, how does the media contribute to isolation? And how does that media cause fear and more self-isolation and anxiety? I'm going to start with you, Jane.
Thanks so much. This is like top question in my mind. So recently I have had my own personal experience with both my parents, but also I've been talking to other people around my age, and we all have older parents. And I said, what's really strange is there seems to be this ultimate fear mongering. And then I realized it's everything from the weather, saying there's going to be this horrific storm, to all the beds are full in Western New York because of COVID. And I'm thinking, and we were expecting to be in a bed. Why? Like all these different issues, but the amount of news and the amount of exposure to news is over the top. So it's that opportunity to say, one of my friends said it was one of the trials that was going on. The mother could tell her what shoes that the person had on during the trial. I mean, that's how much like the detail of being like way over the top and involved in something, when you can talk about the sweater and the details and the, all those types of things. And I thought, wow, it's screen time and technology, but it's mostly the media not being a little more responsible. It is very much a controversial thing in terms of free speech, but this opportunity that it's scaring older people. And it really ticked me off because when you start to see that, and you see that it's impacting the mindset, and then even when there's two people both watching it and they're talking about it all the time, it even exacerbates the situation, which creates a self-isolation. So even though it may not be, it's never going to be perfectly safe. We know that. So if that's the case, what are the risks? What can you do to protect yourself? But there has to be some integration with life again. And so in talking to my parents on Zoom, it's a very lengthy process getting my folks up on Zoom, but we did get it, and we got to see each other in person on Yay. Thanksgiving. Yeah, because they weren't going to have an in-person anything. And my mother goes, "We're not canceling Christmas." And I was like, okay, that's a great sign. But in talking to other folks, I thought it was maybe a little bit more isolated because of my folks, but it's not. It's other people having the same problem, that the COVID started it, and then the media has exacerbated it, and then other things that they may not have worried about before, like a storm that might occur. Well, the weatherman's usually not right anyway, but now it's become a focus, right? So this main focus, I would rather them watching Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune, actually. But so you kind of go through the process, and that's what I was really talking about in terms of media. So like, turn it off, turn it off and watch a movie, turn it off and go outside for a little while, even if you're just sitting outside, doing something else to break it, because it creates not only the fear, but then it creates the anxiety that's related to that. And then it creates a negativity that is abounding. And look for that in your family members, because if we're seeing it there, we're definitely going to be seeing it in other settings too.
Yeah, it's interesting in Chicago. if actually, I like to hear what the weather report is, because we have this really upbeat weather guy, and he'll talk to you about different things that you can be doing in the city based on the weather, which I think is wonderful. And I'm sure that it doesn't happen everywhere, but it's a positive, because right now we have zoo lights. So, bring your family members and your friends out to zoo light, bundle up and go have an outdoor evening. And I think that if the media would give us some positive actions that you
Different
could take,
spin.
a
Yeah.
different spin on it.
Yeah, and I think it's I'm having the same situation with my 96-year-old father-in-law. I'm dealing with it right now, and you go over to his place, and there's a certain all-day news channel that a lot of seniors and a lot of other people listen to that creates a lot of political frenzy and the like. And we have a rule that whenever I come over, we don't watch that channel anymore. But when I leave and come back, that's what's on. And I even have that same rule with my sister and brother-in-law when they come over, because they watch the same thing all the time, and it's like it's not on when you're at this house. So and if you watch a regular channel, ABC, NBC, and whatever, you've got a variety of shows that are on during the day and all the commercials that go with it. But what I've actually had to do with my father-in-law is I've written down the different channels on his cable, because he'll forget. And so it'll be on one channel so long. And it's like,
Right.
here, watch a Hallmark movie. Or here, it's the holidays, watch a Hallmark movie. Here's the old shows. And so he gets into the old shows. And then all of a sudden he's watching a lot less of that one than the other. But he's afraid to make the channel change because he can't remember what the channel is. And then he starts getting in the loop of being really frustrated. So
Right.
being preemptive and writing the things down and putting them in multiple places, because then he'll pile things on top of it and not be able to find it. But
It's a great idea, especially if you know that, your family member or your, elderly friend likes certain things. If you know that they like to watch golf, they were never golfers, but they like to watch golf. And maybe that's code for I want to take a nap. Put down golf and then put down the channels, or put down, cooking shows and put down the channels, something that will give them a different outlook, maybe.
yeah, and then I also have a list of his channels. So I know he likes college football. So I will call up on Saturday and I go, the Arkansas game is on. He goes, oh, it is. And I go turn on channel, and then
Uh-huh.
turn it on and watch the game, because he forgets the channel and that the game is on. So it gets him to do something different.
Well, and then when you don't age in place and maybe you're in a community, the community's got activities that you can engage in. Erica, how do you have residents get involved in communities? How do you encourage people to come out of their apartments and engage with others? I know that last year was very difficult, but this year
Right.
it's, a new opportunity to re-engage. And how do you do that?
Yeah, and obviously depending on the state and what the laws are at the moment and
Right.
all that, but doing things like decorating the Christmas tree, or doing a craft project or something that is holiday related, or baking. But you can also engage with that and do it also have Zoom going on. So they're with the community, within the community, and then also outreaching to family or anybody else outside via Zoom. So it's that twofold of the technology and doing it hands-on with people. But also like reaching out and having different organizations outside the community. We have one community that they like to crochet. So they decided to crochet these mats for the homeless out of recycling bags, like from the grocery store. Like they take their jewel bag and like crochet it, and like everyone, but so that brought the whole community together, because everyone had their grocery bags, so they donated the bags, and then there was essentially a sewing circle.
Wow.
Yeah, so but it also gave them this activity that made them feel good, because they were helping outside the community, and that outreach.
And that's a great way to keep people off the screen time, right?
Mhm.
Is to have them have activities. But what happens for these folks who are aging in place? And maybe, as Jane and Dean indicated, maybe they're hearing so much news that they are a little bit paralyzed in their own homes. How do we get them re-engaged with the community, re-engaged with their family members and their friends?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's.
Oh, go ahead. We all have thoughts on that.
Good,
I mean, I think
good, let's hear
to
them.
the point of earlier is, you know, something made you think, like you said, there's a football game on, Dean. So like you call an outreach, like doing those little things like, oh, so-and-so this song reminds me of you. So you reach out. It's, I think, and just being a good neighbor and almost like a good human, like we have to think of our neighbors and our friends. And if you haven't talked to someone, like reach out, because it's also hard to ask for the help, or they don't know to ask for the help.
I
Right.
think
So
it's
my
being observant.
father-in-law, yeah, my father-in-law is in a community. He was so used to not going to the dining room and having breakfast and lunch delivered, which they were doing for everybody. But when they started having dining back in the dining area, he didn't go down. He was so used to the routine of them bringing the food that he didn't want to change that routine. So even going there, so I try and go there as often as possible to get them out of the community, get something different to eat and the like. But you also, even if they're in a community, you have to be proactive as a family member to reach out to the community and say, I know my father-in-law Harold has not been going down. Can you come up to the apartment and say that there's a special thing going on? We'd like you to come down and join us for dinner, just to start a new routine again.
I'm
Yeah.
sure that that's something that you saw a lot of in your communities, Erica. How did you guys combat that? Did you have enticements to get people to come back to the dining room?
Yeah, and I think they started with some smaller groups, like so that like it wasn't like full blown out full dining room, because obviously none of us want that. They
Right.
also did different seating times, kind of like, let's call it a cruise ship. And so I think that
Or not.
helped mitigate, or not, correct, but like it helped mitigate and make those smaller, more intimate situations versus that having the fear of the big dining room and spreading of things and all of that. But I think it's just also having an aide go check and make sure that like, hey, why don't you, even I'll sit with you. Like if the aide would sit with them, that stuff. It's only one person.
And what was really funny is he did not want to go down because they would only sit 2 people to a table instead of 4. And he goes, what happens if I sit next to somebody I don't want to talk to? He would have gone down if there was 4 people at the table, because then there's more.
You could have had a rotating conversation.
So he wasn't
That's
afraid
hilarious.
of getting, contracting anything. It was more of, I don't want to just be forced to sit with one person. I want more people, and they're too far away and I can't hear them. It's different. It was very interesting.
Well,
Still
it's a good plug for the small house model though too, because the research that we've seen that came out of there, a lot of the small houses were able to maintain consistent staff. So with testing and everything, people were able to continue to engage throughout the entire setting of the pandemic, right? So as a result, there wasn't that reacclimation to the world and reacclimation to society, because their world maintained pretty consistent. And I thought that was a really good contributor. I always think that the small house is a good way to go, or the smaller environments are good for folks, particularly with higher levels of cognitive impairment. But that kind of demonstrated out that here's another good reason, right? That how we could do this and how we could evaluate that in terms of whether it's an apartment setting or others. Can you do the pod, right? To reduce the isolation during something like this, and then follow that through so that continues. We see better outcomes on the flip side for sure.
Sure.
Of that. Yeah.
I'm going to remind everybody who's listening, if you aren't aware of what a small house model is, you can go to the Ageless Living Collaborative website and click on a past webinar that we did that was dedicated to understanding the small house. because it's a great model and it's something that not everybody is aware of. I'm going to ask another question. And this is about how isolation could create a serious mental issue as well as physical issue, and how one sees that and sees it become an even greater issue. Dean?
Yeah, so I had some cool stats that I was able to find, and it showed that 28% of people over 65 were alone based on the 2020 census.
Wow,
28%.
that's a big number.
Yes. And that on the physical side of it, loneliness is equal to a 15 cigarette a day habit on there. And on the physical side, not to the lungs, but just the impact that it has, the negative impact it has on your body.
Overall being.
Right. And it has the same impact as being sedentary or obesity. And what complicates it even further is if you are alone, you're pretty much going to you will be sedentary, and you will probably compensate with eating more and have more higher level of obesity. So you're just not just the mental aspect of it and the cognitive delays that you're going to have, but also obesity and sedentary lifestyle on top of that reduces quality of life, and also
Which is
length of life.
terrifying. Which
Right.
is actually terrifying. And
Right.
Jane touched on that with her own parents, just the fact that they're listening to news, right? And that's impacting them going out, and then they're becoming more sedentary, which
and more
is
dependent.
and more dependent and less healthy. So how do
Well,
we
even-
get everybody moving again?
Yeah, that's the thing of encouragement too. And so it's funny, and I don't know if it's generationally based, but the cost of things have obviously gone up. We all know this, as a result. Well, my mom's like, I'm not paying $7 for the Hellmann's. And I'm like, it's Hellmann's. You have the $7, buy the Hellmann's, enjoy the Hellmann's. So, but it's also trying to have that conversation about being good to yourself. Right. And so there's kind of this, and this has kind of become my newest approach of trying to deal with it personally, but also with other people. It's like just encouraging a little bit different outlook, or having a conversation. So the more conversations people can have, I think even that builds up or brings up the viability of making the cognitive juices flow, if you will, but just the conversations. But now it's also gotten to the point where, is my favorite restaurant still open? Not being familiar enough with social media or even having a smartphone to be able to look up, is such and such still open? What are the hours of it? Can I find it in the phone book? My dad still uses a phone book. Can I call? Can I find out, if I can go there? Will the food be any good? Will it be of value? And so there's all these kinds of conversations that we've been having. So I've been thinking through it in terms of, I'm just going to make reservations, and we're going to go here and we're going to go there, because it's almost like you have to pry people out of their seats a little bit, to give them permission in a way to go, hey, we're going to go engage. We're going to go do this. This is what we're going to do.
And you said something about it being generational, and I think you hit on something important there, because, self-care is not just for millennials, right?
No, it's not.
They understand the value of self-care and what they need to do so they can be their best self. And I think boomers and older, that wasn't part of the messaging that we all got. And so I think that is maybe more difficult for the older side of that generation and beyond to understand that self-care at every age is important.
We need a Jack LaLanne back.
And now you're going to have to explain who that is. Well, I think it's really important. We get, those opportunities to exercise if you're in a community. But you could just as easily put on your walking shoes and walk around the block if you're aging in place, if it's not icy and sleeting. But it's getting that internal impetus to do such thing as go.
Motivation, yeah.
Yeah.
There's
And it
encouragement
helps
that's
to- and
needed.
it helps to combat depression, because
Right.
that's the other thing that
Mhm.
loneliness is going to lead to is it will lead to depression. And then they want an easy resolution of let's just pop the pills to take care of it, rather than let's get moving, let's see happy things and get the endorphins going
Exactly.
on that realm. And that's where the baby boomers will hit, because baby boomers want the pills to make it easier.
It is encouragement too. It's
Yeah.
you know, and
Mhm.
talking with people, like my parents actually have quite a few younger friends. And part of that is because they're older friends. They were in a generation where they were 10 years younger than most of their friends. Most of their friends have passed. So now they kind of have this younger set, and they have a few people. So it is helpful to talk with them and kind of brainstorm about how to, how to engage them. What do you think we can get them to do? Do you think we can get them to do this? And it's all like in an approach. It's almost a strategy in terms of doing it, because you don't want to look like you're demanding it of them or telling them what to do. That's the first, the heels will dig in really solid as soon as they hear you need to do X. Whereas if they said that to me,
do something.
yeah, you should, it would always, and that's like more of how you talk to your kid. But when you turn that back around to the parent, boy, that just doesn't fly at all. So I think anytime the encouragement of, hey, let's have a cup of tea, let's talk about this, let's move on to that, and trying to keep it out of a negative conversation or negative connotation. And I'm with you, Dean, on the news, like just shut it off. I mean, and I found it too, like if for a while there, it was like on, and I was like, I just know more. Just turn it on. I go find something else to do. Even if it was raining outside, there's something else you can do that's either physical in the house or just read a book, anything that would get you out of that mindset. So I think it's being strategic, and it's also remembering that older adults are still older adults. They're not children. They need to have the same dignity. They need to have that option of choice. And sometimes I find if I go, we're going to do this or this, what would you like to do? That gets me much further and gets me out in and about. Like we went to a museum when I was home the last time. It was a short tour. It was manageable. It was still a lot, but it was manageable, and they all had an outing, right? So I think that that's part of it too, is how it's presented.
Power of suggestion.
It's power of suggestion or choice, like it's
Yeah.
like, hey, I thought we'd do this or this. What do you think? Like which would be more preferable to you? And we found that with folks with cognitive impairment as well. If people are always like, oh, they have dementia, they don't have choice. I go, oh no, you can show somebody 2 plates of food. You can show them
2 shirts.
Yeah, exactly.
Typically in some of our memory care, we have a locked closet, but we also have an unlocked closet. So that way they can still choose their clothes for the day.
Right.
People still want to do that, and they've been doing it their whole lives. So you got to continue
Give them
that.
the opportunity. Yeah. I used to have a resident, Miriam Sosnowski. She's like my favorite resident of all time. And I would come over and she lived in the nursing home. She'd tell me everything that was wrong with the design of the room. So we improved the room design after that, but we would have dinner together and things like that. But she used to have me help her with her she was right side stroke. So immobile on her right side, but she'd be like, can you help me pick out the earrings for my outfit for tomorrow? People think that, oh, you just because you're older, you don't want to look nice, or you don't want to have your jewelry on, or those different things. And I found out after she had passed away that she used to do that with her sister too. And I never knew that she shared that with her sister. So I just thought that was just a beautiful example of choice and autonomy and those things. So I think that isolation is no different than that.
Well, and making those things accessible, because by bringing that up, it reminded me of when my mom lived independently, and she had things up on a high shelf, right? And she had shoes, she loved shoes, and she couldn't access all her shoes because they were on shelving. And at a certain point, she was unstable to get to those. So by bringing the shoes all down and putting them on the floor of the closet, she was then able to continue to enjoy them. So thinking about how people are aging in place and, not cutting themselves off from things that they enjoyed, I think is equally as important, because there's almost an isolation of self. Now you only have X to look at and to enjoy, because you can't reach Y,
And they've always had, just because it's always been that way doesn't mean there's not another way it can be. And you get stuck in your way. I mean, everyone gets stuck in their ways.
Right. So would we maybe suggest to friends and family to create a list of activities that are not screen oriented that can get people out and engaged, whether it's come
Oh,
on
yeah.
a dog with me, or, let's go to the museum for a little while, or tea, or, here's my favorite reading list. Are there any things that would, you'd like to read, kind of thing?
Yeah, we did do the, so my mom is they're really hard to buy things for when you get older too. It's like, what's going to be the holiday gifts this year? And my mom goes, I think I found something I would like. And I was like, what? Because there's never anything, So I had gotten them each a book, because we always all do the kind of the book exchange. So we're big readers in our family. But she goes, that book club, the book of the month club, I thought that's still around. I mean, I used to get books from that when I was like 10, and I was like, cool. So they got that yesterday, and she goes, oh, and thank you so much. This is the best gift you could have ever gotten us. And I thought, okay, we're onto something here. Let's keep that going, so that now let's find out what they're reading, what their reading list is. Then we can have a conversation about what they're reading. It's the same with like the ball game, Dean. It's like my dad's a Buffalo Bills fan, and they started out strong this season, and now they've been like, they're not so good, but we still have that conversation, right? So he's like, hey, they're playing the Ravens today. And I was like, yeah, I saw that. And, what's the highlights? And, so that having the conversation with somebody who's interested in something that they're interested in. I mean, I could talk all day long about a technology project we're working on, and my dad will be like asleep in 3 minutes. It's just like it's just not of interest. But if we can find the common topics too that are really good. We just got a comment. Book of the Month Club is alive and thriving, actually, but with young adults. Was a client of ours. Oh, that's funny. That came from David.
But also there's so many subscription boxes now that you can easily, there's like craft boxes or art, fine art, or to get them creating and to get them along those same lines. They can get it's a surprise every month, but also then you can engage with them and talk to them, or the grandkids can do the same art project as the grandparents.
Sure.
Like,
Well, let's talk about these resources. You guys all have your fingers on certain resources. Let's share some of the better resources that get people engaged.
Well, one of the ones that so my office manager has a little girl that I'm close with. And so we do the passports. It's a box that comes from somewhere around the world each month. And it has all these different things in it. And I went by her house the other day, and her window was down, and she's like, I got the science package. And I mean, for a 7-year-old to be that excited about science, I was like, awesome. So I think that I was talking to a group, they do different packaging and stuff like that. They were supported by the United Way, but they did things like activity packages or newborn packages or whatever, but they started doing activity art kits. I saw it, I think it was on I must have saw it on a social media posting, but they had art kits that they were selling or giving to residents. And they gave out so many that they needed so many more. So they gave out something like 8,000 art kits during COVID. Yeah. I mean, what an awesome, somebody really thought through that and then created a kit that was somewhat self-driven, but, perhaps there's another resource for that too. Or, kind of like the guy, I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, with the big hair who used to do the painting, and everyone would watch him and they'd be like, oh, and he had this really soft, gentle voice, and people would watch him and do their paintings with him. But it's that kind of idea. But I thought the painting kit, it was a really good idea for a lot of people who wanted to do different. Thank you, Bob Ross.
I was just about to say, I was like, it's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a sketch box for a long time. I got different tools, and they give you different techniques, but it was great. And then I knew other people who were picking up art again. So like we got to communicate based on art, which was a nice thing. There's also like plant subscriptions that you can, people became plant people over the pandemic. And so like you can get seeds and like grow things, or, which again, it engages, with different people.
Yeah, so some of the things that I've had with my father-in-law, and so this is a very timely subject in my world. He loves dogs, but he hasn't had a dog in a long time. So I reached out to the pet therapy in his area and go visit him with that. But then the community saw that, and so now they visit a couple different residents in their
That's
apartments.
exactly.
So it's not only the seeing the dog, but it's also the
The
person
handler.
with the dog being able to have that one-on-one
Right.
scenario with them. So that was one thing. The other that I think is really important, because I'm remote from my father-in-law. His all his blood family is remote, but he does have certain friends that are still in Little Rock, and so it's reaching out to them and asking them. I just talked to him. He sounds depressed. Will you go
Send
over and
somebody
visit?
over. Right.
Can you pick them up and go for dinner or what like that? But there's some other organization. There's something called the Friendship Line, and that's a number that they can call. It's for seniors specifically who are lonely, just need someone to talk to. Sometimes they don't feel comfortable talking to their family on some issue or whatever, and so that was one where you do an introduction on the phone, and then it frees him up to be able to do this. And sometimes you can even ask them to call the him rather than him calling them.
That sounds great. So
So
the
you're
friendship
forced.
line, are those people of his peers, Dean?
Yeah, it's based in the area, so it's a 24-hour hotline basically.
Neat.
And the Mental Health of America also has one for seniors, and that's a national organization as well. That's 24/7 on there. So I can send information, and you can have it on the website.
Great.
But there's
We'll
those third
post
party
all of these
organizations.
resources.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are great. Erica, do you have any that you guys call upon to engage people? Any resources that we might?
And
also
a lot of
be-
our communities have done the, support animal. And obviously I'm a big fan of that. But a lot of times it's very, instead of nationally based, they do local organizations, like, and have some, maybe have kids come in, because that generational is always makes people feel better. So we had a community recently that had kids came in to help decorate for the holiday. So even if they can't see their grandkids, that helps. So
there are other organizations that will come in to communities to hopefully make the seniors feel a little bit more a part of things. Maybe they're missing their grandkids, they haven't been able to travel. COVID certainly shut that down, but maybe they just don't live nearby. And I know that the Suzuki music organization will go into communities and perform. And typically, if you check with local schools, particularly at the elementary and junior high level, they will bring a program to the communities so that they're engaging with young people, which is typically, a boost to their feelings at the moment, right? And then they can talk about it. So there are certain things that you can bring inside to a community, not necessarily into an aging in place scenario, but conversely, for those aging in place, they can go and they can see the Suzuki performances, and they can, go to certain community-based performances at different times in the holidays. And that's something maybe friends and family can identify for them to get them out of the house to a safe place, get them away from the screen time and the TV, right?
Yeah.
Those
and
are things.
Meals, and Meals on Wheels, which is a national organization, but locally
Right.
based too. You can also, most of the times it's needs based, but you can also reach out to them, give them donations to then visit your family member if you're not there,
Absolutely.
and give them that one-on-one time.
Absolutely. And, I'm glad you brought that up, Dean, because a lot of people don't realize that Meals on Wheels does that extra step, that you can actually first, you can make a donation to them. You can ask them to reach out to, senior citizen, Mr. Smith, and they will do that. And they are tremendous about doing that.
And they'll also help with their pets too. Just an FYI, they'll also help with their pets.
Oh, that's a great thing to know.
And I also know other dog rescues and stuff like that will also go into communities and help people with their pets and stuff like that as well.
That's
in my-
great to hear.
And my mom was always a volunteer for years and years with Meals on Wheels, and her driver was 86, I think, and Earl. And he would drive, and my mom would run in, and they had a couple of residents that one was blind but knew her way around her home, and she lived by herself. And my mom goes, "I'd run in, turn on the tea kettle, then we would get the meal ready." I mean, like, so it really became like her being just as interactional and intentional as it was for the people that they were doing it for. And ironically, they were probably as old or older than some of the people that they did assist, right? And then they had other folks who were like 100, good
Right.
good farm stock where I grew up, so people lived to be like 105 or whatever. And so that was a really good thing. And I think that the volunteering part, when that started to slow down, that got harder. And I'm wondering now, from listening to you guys talk about this again, because it reminds me of all her good stories, maybe there's a way to reverse some of that. I mean, they don't really need the Meals on Wheels part, but they certainly could use the socialization part, right? And seeing where that might be able to go. And even just young people coming by, I think that would really do them a great deal of good. I was thinking about that. I have a friend I grew up with. I've known her since I was 6. Her 3 boys are grown, but they live in the community. And I thought, it'd be really nice if they just dropped in once in a while, like something like that, just to break the tension, because they won't do it on their own. Sometimes you need to have that little bit of intentional community, if you will.
Right. An intervention, a social intervention.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about social media for a moment. We've talked about getting away from screen time, but there's some value to social media. What's the impact of social media on loneliness? And can it be a positive resource? I kind of think it can, because these are not junior high girls we're talking about. Dean?
Yeah, no, it's I tried to do that with my father-in-law, and so there's the technology issue then that comes up, and how do you make it easy for them? I'm still trying to figure that one out. But when I'm there and I can do FaceTime with his granddaughter and his great grandson, and he lights up.
Sure.
So it's really figuring out and learning. And when I find it out, I'll share it with everybody. But it has a potential for a great impact on it. And then if you would just get online and then be able to just, even something like Facebook and the like, because there's other people in his community that his age that, he's probably the oldest one there, but knows how to use Facebook and can interact, but he's afraid of it on that.
Well, and I think in a lot of the communities, there's almost like a concierge type person. There's the go-to person in a community that can help most of the residents, with those applications. And so I think that communities have gotten pretty savvy toward that, right, Erica?
Yeah, they have. And I mean, we've actually started even putting in smaller virtual rooms as part of like planning for future for renovation. So that way there are cameras set up on large screen TVs. So they're not looking at smaller, screens that can help that. So they can still interact with the outside world, even though it's through technology. But also we've started there's some communities that have like small Facebook, like teaching sessions, like here, how to set up an account. Here's how to post a picture, like as dumbed down and simplified as possible, but so that it makes it manageable and they don't get overwhelmed, so that they will want to do it. So yeah, and I mean, in terms of social media and virtual, you can now do chess games with people, like with grandkids, or virtual coloring, or puzzles that you can do them with another person. So we've seen a lot of that coming into the communities as well.
Even once they get to a point where they're a little bit comfortable, if you set up just a couple of apps for them, it can literally be pushing one button on their iPhone. For FaceTime, it's one button. If you've already queued up mom, the sister, the grandchild by name, they can push that name and boom, it's FaceTime for them. It's super easy. Words with friends. Yep. That's another thing that's really great for seniors, because it engages their minds. They're playing a game with another person. And that's a positive too. So there are a
I
lot
heard of a resident playing virtual Yahtzee. It was like with grandkids, like, and they were in 3 different states. Like, so it was really interact. Yeah. So there's all
That's a
kinds of
case study.
is a
That's fun to
case study.
share with everybody else. The more of that we can engage with people, be it at home or in communities, the better off it is. Like Jane, your parents probably played Yahtzee. They probably, if we could get them engaged with other members of the family, that'd be a bonus. Same for your father-in-law, Dean. Everybody's got that situation.
And it does give a good inkling as to why intergenerational communities can be really effective, because like we don't have any grandkids in our family. So there's also that part of, well, who are the grandkids? So for me, it's my office manager, her daughter, it's some of my other kids from foster care, it's other you kind of create your own grandchildren, in a sense. Or your kids. So I think that there's something to that with the intergenerational living too, of being able to have folks that you become friends with. Because what I found is that younger people, if you aren't viewed as a parent, they will tell older people something else that they won't tell their own parents. Like they, like kids, like that confidant side of it. And I think the grandparent falls into that category. I think I've accidentally fallen into that category because of not having children. So it's been really interesting though to see how that works, like how that bond can be structured. And so I think creating some of those bonds, whether they're virtual or real, I think can be really helpful. And you had said about it not being high school. All I could think about, if you've seen the movie Queen Bees, oh my goodness, you would think that it really was high school. It's about 4 ladies who live in a retirement community, and how the 3 mean girls are already there when another woman comes.
I think it happens. I think it happens in communities. Absolutely.
Totally happens.
And there's the cool
all the time.
There's absolutely the cool table, and there are the people who are on the periphery are never going to get to the cool table. It happens. It all comes back, terrifying as that is.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a play for aging in place there. I'm not sure. But if you're one of the cool kids and you're going to sit at the cool table, then you want to be in the community because it's all happening. Right. It's all happening there. Right. It is kind of amusing how it goes full circle. Let's talk for a second about faith-based organizations and how they might address issues of loneliness and how they might be combating them on a weekly, even daily basis.
Well, I think faith-based, and I would put that kind of in a nonprofit mission-based, like we had talked about a little bit, that just that impact, and it's the volunteer projects, Erica, like you were talking about, finding a need in the community and then filling it. And I think that gives people purpose. It gives people an opportunity to connect in different ways. I also think that people are more aware when something else is going on or someone is lonely, because it's like, oh, I haven't seen Audrey here for a few weeks. I better check up on Audrey because, I haven't seen her. Because I think people do have a tendency of checking up when they don't see folks. Whereas without that, or without some of that community-based service side, I think that people can be isolated or isolated longer and not really know that they are being isolated. So I think that helps. It also broadens your base. So what I've found is the world gets smaller and smaller as you get older. And if that's the case and you haven't broadened out your friendship acquaintance base, then you don't have as many of those interactions. So if you have more of a mission-based or outreach or mentoring is always good too. That's always a really good one. If you can provide that and have somebody do that, or they volunteer for a couple of hours and they read to a child or to another person or whatever it might be, those things happen often because of community-based interaction. And I don't think that necessarily happens when you're living in just an apartment, or you're living in an area that doesn't necessarily have some of those opportunities for people.
Right. And just to follow up on what you said, is a lot of people don't realize that they are lonely or that they are depressed. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it's really, I've just found my father-in-law will not reach out for help.
Yeah, mine won't either.
It's hard to. I mean, there's a stigma to it, like asking for help.
Yeah. And so he's a very religious man. read the Bible, all that sort of stuff, but will not reach out to his pastor. So I had to call his pastor to be able to, what services to offer. Can you go to his apartment? He's alone, he needs interaction. And so now they're setting that up where he goes, or other people from the church will go and visit once a week on there.
That's
And
really
so
good.
then they can have, services and church talk and that element, but it's there and it's wonderful, but he would never have asked for it. And to follow up on you were saying, Jane, I think you also have to be proactive, that when your parents or friends or whatever, when they're a little bit younger and have, you see that they don't have a lot of friends, and you can look 10 years in advance, that it's then being proactive and saying, how can you get involved now so that you're taken care of later?
Right.
And having talks and the like.
Yeah.
Because
I think it's true.
I think that's a really great point, because I don't think a lot of people look ahead to that, and they think, oh, maybe I'm a little introverted and that's fine, but they don't look at that as all of a sudden that's going to be serious loneliness, right?
Yeah.
And how they need to expand their horizons. And that's great for, before you get to that point. But when you're at that point, being able to call on an organization, or if it is faith-based or community-based, something that connects to you, and letting them know, I need to be involved, or I'd like to see somebody from X. And some people won't say that. So it takes a family member, and it takes a friend or an acquaintance or a neighbor to make that call for you.
Yeah.
I think that really it's about trying to support your family member, your friend, or your neighbor, because they're not going to make the call. If they're in loneliness, they're already in kind of a little bit of depression anyway, right?
Yeah.
So they're not making the call on their own behalf most of the time.
They have a group in Western New York called Care Patrol, and all I could picture was like Paw Patrol, like the for kids. And I was like, cool, Care Patrol. I liked what it was called, and it was kind of like cute and a little cheeky, and I thought, now that's a group. So because I've been kind of doing the research on, who's the best caregivers if they ever needed them and they wanted to bring somebody in, or someone did have to come into the home, whatever. So I've been like rating them, going through the HHS system, they're going to have it all pinned down so that I know, if something does happen, when it happens, I can go, okay, this is who we're going to call. And we kind of have it planned out. So we've been kind of doing some strategy like that, because even getting someone to come in to clean, my mom's she's no one in my house. And so that's become having to look at it in a different way. So I know there's one program called Silver Sneakers, which is and we actually had a friend who had dementia, and she needed to get some more activity and a little bit of care management, but was resistant. So what we did was introduced the Silver Sneakers person to her as a friend. And so as a third party, she thought it was a friend. She goes, oh, I'm going to go to Silver Sneakers when I stop and pick you up. And so that's how we got a healthy trip to Silver Sneakers and broadened her being independent for a little longer. Right. So sometimes you got to be sneaky. Sometimes you got to be sneaky.
It's just how you present the information.
Exactly. So it's not sneaky. Thank you for not making me feel sneaky.
Exactly. I'll go with Erica's word. That's
all in the delivery.
That's right. That's right. Well, and the fact that we've got, for people who no longer have a dog and they miss their dogs, and, if shelters
Give
are
you Phoebe. Okay, I'll bring you a puppy. Bye.
I got you connected. We're good.
Yeah, I think this is all good. And, the same thing happens with people coming in and out, whether they're, cleaning the house, helping to clean the house, or maybe they're dog walkers, maybe people just aren't as ambulatory and they have a pet that needs to go out and they've got a dog walker coming in. That's, another connection to the outside. And so they have to look at all those connections.
We've had some good conversations recently about workforce development. And, as we know that people have kind of this migration out of the healthcare workforce, and we're trying to figure out how to bring them back in. So one of our a research data management person, she's a gerontologist, she was in the office last week or week before Thanksgiving. And she said, we have all these people who really want a job or something else to do. Maybe they're stay-home moms, whatever. She goes, but they just need a few hours a week. And so we had this idea of what if we took it and trained people as all a part-time workforce on purpose, so because one of my kids had gone for an interview for a CNA. She already had a weekend job of home care, and she didn't want to give up her client because she'd built this really beautiful relationship with her. And she goes, but the only way that they would hire in the facility-based rehab was to do 5 days and every other weekend. And she said, I can do 5 days. I'll be happy to do 5 days, but I can't do every other weekend because every weekend I take care of this other woman. There was no understanding for that at all. It was all or nothing. And so the more we started thinking about it, we were like, what if there really is a part-time workforce out there that we haven't even thought about tapping? And so instead of having 8 GNAs or CNAs, maybe I have 16, but they're all happily there for 4 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day. And does that make sense? There's more coordination on that side of it, but it was an interesting thought, because if people wanted to participate in doing something more positive, but they just couldn't simply do it as a full-time employee, how could they do it? Depending on their children's schedules, or maybe they went back to school. Now the kids will go back to school and they have 4 hours a day that they would like to do something, but that's it. That's all it can be, because they have all these other things they have to do, and, soccer games and whatever. But I thought that was a really interesting thought to me, was tapping the work share in a different way than we ever have before. I thought that was an interesting thought. In terms of how we could do better coverage. And maybe some of that is volunteerism and going and visiting and, saying, here's 5 elders that really need a phone call,
Now, I kind of like the idea of, the kids that are the Girl Scout age, earning a badge in supporting seniors, like going and visiting seniors, playing checkers or chess, or just, visiting about,
and you get a box of Thin Mints before you leave.
I think you get a badge, right? You have to fill it out. And then you've got all of these kids who are, they're obviously learning to do service in the community and to support people. And why not make another badge? Girl Scouts are still strong, not just the Thin Mints.
Right.
Remember, we're also combating obesity, so watch out for those Thin Mints.
Okay, so you only get 1 pack of Thin Mints.
That's right. You have to go for a walk before you get the
Thin Mints. Yeah, that's right. And you have to do it with tea.
I have to take my Scotty for a walk before he gets a cookie, right? Well, I think we've had a lot of great ideas. I love the resources. If everybody can send those over and we can post them on the website, that'll be great. I'm going to ask if anybody who's in the audience has any specific questions for our panelists now. And if so, if you can write them in the Q&A and we'll answer. And if not, we thank you for joining us. Any last thoughts, great ideas, what you want to do with your senior stay-at-home person?
Well, one other thing, just for that, because we're also talking about holidays, is the other thing that I had to do with my father-in-law is he wouldn't have anything Christmas in his apartment. So I called someone who cut steps or watches out for him to go in and decorate his apartment, because that alone makes you feel
Festive.
a little bit of juice and festive in there.
I love that idea.
Yeah, it's like when you're going to have a guest over. Like last time I was home, it was in October because we didn't do Thanksgiving together, but because of the fear part. But when we looked at in October, the good part was there was something to look forward to. There was somebody coming over to visit as a result of me coming to visit. Like you create this different piece and parts of it, and that's what. Hopefully this is what Christmas will do as well, because I can already kind of hear we're thinking about this. What do you think about that? We've made homemade spaghetti sauce for this day, so there's anticipation. And I think that doing the anticipation, I agree with Dean about the decorations, or send somebody a small bouquet of flowers or a plant or something, because there's something about that to me that just cheers everyone up. And I think that could really help. So I think that that's something else we could do too, is even a Christmas card. And I know that's archaic and thinking, but a Christmas card for an older couple or an older person hearing from you, I've heard back later that they're like, oh, that was so nice that you remembered me.
Right, but don't send
It's nice to open
don't
mail.
send the Debbie Downer letter saying everybody that died the past year.
Right. It's got to be upbeat, smiley puppies, elves.
Yes.
Go for that.
I think everybody loves flowers, no matter how small or how large the bouquet. I think that is a wonderful way of brightening somebody's day. My husband and I have for a long time been involved in a community food bank here in Chicago called the Lakeview Pantry. And, they feed a lot of folks who are food insecure. And they have a number of vendors in the Chicagoland area who contribute, food to them. But the thing that really made me kind of go, oh, that's so kind, is that Trader Joe's, and I'm going to do a shameless plug for them, not only gives them food every week, but they also give flowers, because
We've had that come to our communities. A couple local communities had some Trader Joe's that at the end of the week, they get delivered. And then, so our residents had actually done flower arranging classes with
Isn't
the
that
donated.
neat?
Yeah.
I love that, because
That's
they
great.
felt
That's
like
great.
it's great to feed people, but let's feed their
Mhm.
spirit too. And the fact that they give flowers also just, made them really good guys to me. So whatever you can do, we will be posting all of the resources on the website. I want to thank my panelists today. Thank you for joining us on ALC webinar. Erica, it was your first time. I hope you'll
My
come
first time.
back.
Yes.
And Dean and Jane, thank you so much for contributing to this webinar. I think that this was a lot of great information and a lot of good sharing, and hopefully people who were watching and listening will have some great ideas to move forward with their family and friends on the holidays and every day. Again, we are the Ageless Living Collaborative. You can find us on the web, www.agelesslivingcollaborative.org. If you have any questions, feel free to write them on the website, and one of our great collaborators will get back to you with an answer. Thanks again for joining us today, and everybody have a safe and happy holiday.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Good to
Thanks
be with
so
everyone.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.